I've been following the events transpiring with the grand jury decision of Michael Brown and Eric Garner, and I am deeply disappointed by the decisions made by the grand jury, um, and I'm even more disappointed by the response of black people to these decisions, especially the people in Ferguson who decided to riot and loot. Um, Again, but the saddest part is the continued same response here in New York. More marching and more protesting. None of this stuff really has had an impact, short term or even long term, on either of these situations. Marching and protesting, people have been doing that, I say, since Emmett Till. And really, there hasn't been much change. All the change we get is superficial, and it really is a definition of insanity when you do the exact same things and expect a different result. People have been marching and protesting for over 50 years against um, people killing black people, and it hasn't led to any serious change for black people. Um, I look at the case of Eric Garner, and it's just deeply saddening to me because I live in New York City, and here we have yet another case of a black man killed by police. And the saddest part is that we think that it's when people are outraged, but they don't even know what they're being outraged about. The people you really should be outraged with are these disingenuous politicians like Mayor Bill de Blasio, who comes across saying that, you know, I really, if this was my son, and he uses his son as a prop, but he really is really disingenuous because if he was really concerned, he would have just fired this guy. Officer Daniel Pantaleo had two federal civil rights lawsuits against him, and then this is before he choked out Eric Garner. He had two federal civil rights lawsuits for using a chokehold, and in both cases, the plaintiff won. The question is, why does this man still have a job, and why isn't the mayor or the police commissioner? And then you have the police commissioner. I'm going to make this point. You have the police commissioner who said it looks like an obvious chokehold. And now I watched him on Good Day New York a couple of days ago, and he was backpedaling. And the question people have to start asking themselves is, why does this man still have a job? It really looks like to me that this guy should have never been a police officer in the first place. He's grossly unqualified for the position, and for him to have had two federal civil rights lawsuits, two judgments against him, and the man is still working, sounds like a cover up to me. Seriously, this man should not have even been carrying a badge. He should not have been in this job, but people covered up for him. It looks like they're covering up for him. They sent him to Staten Island, where they thought he would be safe. And then we have this happen because a lot of people in business, they do this a lot. What they do is they know the guy's a screw up, but then they put him in a position where they think he's going to be safe because they think the guy is going to be okay. And then he goes and does something totally heinous and utterly egregious, like with this whole Eric Garner situation. And the sad part is the culture is of New York City Police Department and New York City government is still continuing to cover this for this guy. The big problem, when I look at it, is this man should have been fired years ago. He was grossly unqualified to even be a police officer, and you can't continue to make the same mistake over and over again. Just like black people continue to make the same mistake over and over again with this marching and protesting and thinking it's going to have an impact. I really look at the situation and we really need a change of tactics. We have Al Sharpton talking about going out to march on Washington. Didn't we do that last year to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington? How many marches are we going to do? All you get from marching and protesting is sore throats and tired feet, and possibly on a government watch list. I look at that as it's not really having an impact. I was sitting in my home on the Thanksgiving, and you had black folks going out saying they were protesting for Michael Brown by standing in front by disrupting the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, and then on Black Friday they were protesting, talking about Blackout Black Friday. Now, That might have made a lot of noise in the news media, but it wasn't constructive action. What would have been constructive action were for black people to start participating in black group economics and really make a statement on Black Friday by taking the time to go shop at black owned businesses. Now, that would have been a powerful statement, but many black people don't want to do that. They want to make a lot of noise, get on the cameras, shout slogans like hands up, don't shoot, no justice, no peace, but that's not going to affect us long term. You really need a long term strategy, and black folks, what they've been doing with this whole thing, I say even since the civil rights movement, is reactionary, not responsive. We really need to start focusing on things like group economics. I mean, I look at Al Sharpton's whole strategy and him and the so-called clergy, and for all of their discussion, even Barack Obama and Eric Holder, not a single discussion about group economics or building up black businesses or dealing with the situations that led to Eric Garner being on that street corner with so-called loose cigarettes. The fact that he was on that street corner was because he probably was out of work. And now this is just me making my assumptions based on the information that was out there. Because they said they were arresting for loose cigarettes. If this man was selling loose cigarettes, maybe it's because he couldn't get a job. Because it's very hard for black men to get jobs and keep jobs because they face so many obstacles in the American job market. Because they face not only from white supremacy, they face issues with black women and with certain black men. And if this man, I always came up with this theory. I wrote it on my blog a while back. If Eric Garner had a job, maybe he wouldn't have been on the street. Maybe he wouldn't have been there in the first place. I mean, I look at a lot of things. We are not really looking at the economic situations here. And Al Sharpton and all these activists, all they're doing is they're making a lot of noise, but they're not really saying anything that helps black people long term. It's just a lot of sound bites and a lot of rhetoric, but there is no serious long term plan. I mean, yeah, you got just. I mean, they didn't even get justice for Eric Garner for all the marching and protesting. The grand jury still came out with the decision not to indict the officer. I mean, that's why I say it's insanity to keep going on this march and protest, shuck and jive, blame and shame game because this is not going to stop things. What we really need is a constructive plan and a constructive action, and group economics is part of a constructive plan and constructive action because all you're doing is just screaming and yelling, and the whole thing is that you don't really look at the long-term picture like I looked at the long-term picture. December 13th is a Saturday, and there are no people in the offices like on Washington, D.C. out there to even see anybody for you to even be heard. Yeah, you got on TV, but this guy's out, the district attorney and all these other people are out playing golf. Um, or they're out somewhere, not even in the city. So for all your marching and protesting, nobody hears you. And I looked at Al Sharpton and his what is it, Caravan for Justice a couple months ago. Exact same thing because he marched and protested on a Saturday. Nobody's in the office. Nobody's working. Those offices are closed. All the courthouses, all the political government offices, they're all closed. So for all of his marching and protesting, it had no real impact on the people who would who you want to hear. I mean, and we have him talking about now it's a federal matter. But again, if it's a federal matter, why are you marching and protesting in Washington on a Saturday, December 13th? This is not logical. It doesn't follow a frame of logic. And even more insane is black folks' response, which is the Ferguson response, which was burning and looting. And here in New York, the other response, which was, I'm going to stand in front of a store and protest saying blackout Black Friday, but I'm not going to go, instead of taking my own efforts, instead of standing outside of a Walmart or Target or Kmart or Macy's, like here, Macy's in New York, just standing outside of a Macy's, I needed to go find, I needed to do Google search, find out where all the black owned stores are, and go over there and have a real impact. Because if enough of us took our money and put it in the black owned businesses, that would have made a powerful statement. If people were to have done that, that would have made a powerful statement and it would have probably kickstarted the dead black economy because the reason why we have so many of these situations is because a lot of our men are out of work, and they're on the streets. They're just sitting around, and this is how trouble starts. And sometimes they're just coming home from work, and this trouble starts. But in a lot of cases, this is what happens, man. We really need that economic base to get the political base to really get some inroads here. And a lot of these activists and stuff, they're making a lot of noise, but they're not coming up with a comprehensive plan on how to deal with things. And that's just the first component, because you also have to deconstruct and break down. Um, this is just my theory on it, about how they came to these verdicts. You have to really understand how Hollywood works. You have to understand the media works, because there was I'd say, an intricate plan to get these grand jury decisions, and that started right after these incidents with with three media events. I mean, not three, four. I'm gonna say the movie No Good Deed, which was released in October, which featured the Black Brute character Colin, which put it in a lot of people's minds that, this is the way black men are. They're extremely violent, and they show this black man assaulting this white woman in the movie. They show him terrorizing this black woman, and this movie was a hit at the box office, made $24.5 million in the first week it was open. But it was also being used behind the scenes as part of a campaign to put ideas in people's minds about black men. And that was just the first part of it. And then the whole thing is that you see a lot of us watch this media, but we don't understand that there's messages behind it. And the message in No Good Deed was about saying that black men aren't human. They're just brutes. They're because a brute is an old stereotype from post Reconstruction. It's a stereotype that says black men are violent and savage, and they're sexual deviants and perverts, and the only way to deal with this violent black man is to kill him. And that's the image that they want to put in a lot of white people's minds and non-black people's minds, that this black man is a brute and a monster. And that was the first salvo of it. The second salvo was showing you the videotape of Ray Rice punching out his wife, and that was also part of the campaign. Because you have to understand, white supremacy works like this. They work on a long-term strategy. These guys are playing chess. In chess, you play your moves 4 or 5 steps ahead. You plan your moves 4 or 5 steps ahead, and even 6 or 7 steps ahead, so that you can get the checkmate. But many black people, we're just short-term reacting to everything. We don't see the bigger picture. With these situations, like I mentioned before, the movie No Good Deed being released in the at the theater, making $24.5 million at the box office, and having such a large audience of people watching it. We don't see the Ray Rice situation where they show you the video of him punching out his wife, the edited video. Because that's what they showed you in the beginning, was the edited video. They talk about Adrian Peterson beating his child. Um, and then the icing on the cake, which was Bill Cosby, the accusations from 30 years ago about Bill Cosby being a rapist. Now they put all that information out there in the media just about the same time that the grand juries for Michael Brown and Eric Garner are convening. And you have to really look at that big picture. You've been imbibing all of this media information about black brutes in the media, and then all of a sudden we have these grand juries convening. And again, this is what people have been shown, these images of these violent black men, and then the icing on the cake is Bill Cosby's these old 30-year-old accusations against Bill Cosby about being a rapist. And you wonder how this decision came about. And because if you've been watching all this information, and then on top of it, I mean, if you've been watching this information for the past 2 months, and then all of a sudden you're on a grand jury, of course it's going to have some sort of indirect effect on your decision. You may think it's just the evidence, but you don't understand that the media we watch and hear and see has a direct effect on us, has indirect effect on us. And the reason why they put out all of these images in the media, that was on purpose. I'm gonna say that clearly, that it was on purpose. Um, it's just interesting to me that they come out with all of it over time. And the thing is that because most people aren't long-term critical thinkers, they can't see the big picture regarding Eric Garner and Michael Brown and how this decision came about. Because the whole thing is, we're going to put this media out here. White supremacy put out all this media featuring these images of black brutes. I mean, bombarded people with these images of black brutes. And then, I mean, just before these two juries are supposed to convene to deal with these issues, the actions of these officers, it's just very interesting to me that all of this information just comes about just out of nowhere regarding the situation. I mean, you have after the aftermath of the Eric Garner chokeout and the Michael Brown shooting, you have all of a sudden a movie, No Good Deed, featuring a psychopathic black man, a brute who kills a white woman and terrorizes a black woman and has to be killed by the black woman. Then you have Ray Rice on video, and an edited video, because they don't show you the part where the black woman is arguing with him and spitting in his face. They don't show you that part. But TMZ releases this video of Ray Rice punching out his girlfriend, Janae Palmer, at the time, which is an old video at that. Um, then they come out with Adrian Peterson saying that he's a child abuser. And then they follow this up with 30-year-old accusations against Bill Cosby. Again, trying to demonize the image of the black man and say that he is not a human being, he is not valuable, and that his life doesn't matter. And the only way to deal with the brute is to kill him. And just justify, and because that's what they did. They used the brute propaganda to justify not only killing black men, but to deny black men their rights. Because you have to really understand black history to understand history of the brute. In the cases when black men tried to apply for certain jobs during Jim Crow, they would invoke the brute and then use that as a way to terrorize black men. Say, don't apply for this job. They would use it during voting times when black men wanted to vote. They would use the brute to say, don't vote or we'll kill. The whole thing is that they use this as a excuse to kill black men and to lynch black men. That's what the brute was used for. To say that he was a monster, he was a savage and a menace to society. But in reality, black men were just trying to fight for their rights. And this is the brute is a tool, that propaganda tool that white supremacy uses to demonize and dehumanize black men so they can have justification for killing black men. And the whole thing is that once they have demonized and dehumanized you, killing a black man is like killing a roach. And you feel justified in killing him because you feel like, oh, this black man is a threat to me. He's a danger to me. And I have every right to kill him. It wasn't, and then you have, like I said recently with Bill Bratton, he was on Good Day New York and he was backpedaling. Oh, it wasn't a chokehold. It didn't look like a chokehold. And all of a sudden, we have this. The evidence now is that it's saying, oh, it didn't look like a chokehold. When he said in the previous video, when he first saw it, it clearly looks like a chokehold to me. Again, this all goes back to black man is not human. We have every right. We all feel justified in killing him, and that it's okay to kill him. So Eric Garner, what they did was they did all of this to get these decisions, and these decisions have a long-term impact on black people, because what's going to happen is more and more white people and non-black people are going to feel justified in killing black people, and they're going to feel like, oh, it's okay for me to just do this. And sad part is, a lot of us, our response, which is marching and protesting for person after person, is not going to cut it. We really need a group economic plan to build our own black community, because our community now is just a bunch of hoods, and there is no economic base, there is no business base, and without an economic or a business base, you can't really fight white supremacy and racism effectively. Because guys like Al Sharpton and these pastors and the other people, they're just out to exploit the situation to get some crumbs from the table. And even I'd say Barack Obama and Eric Holder, they really didn't care about anything. I mean, they'll say that, oh, we were just letting the process go. They really didn't care at all. I mean, the whole situation in Ferguson shouldn't have gotten that badly. I mean, he should have taken an active role, but he sends out his attorney general instead of going himself out to the scene to let people know that he's the leader of the country. It showed how ineffective, because it really showed me how ineffective Barack Obama was in that situation. Then at the same time, you have Eric Holder all of a sudden, oh, he's the guy, he's resigning when it looks like the situation was too hard for him. And then Barack Obama's appointing a new attorney general, but now all of a sudden Eric Holder's the attorney general again. I mean, this is another tactic that a lot of dysfunctional people like Manginas like to use to confuse people. Nobody knows who the manager is. It's called "Who's the Manager," where I'll where he what he does is he says I'm gonna not be the manager because Eric Holder, who's running the Attorney General's office. Barack Obama announces this black woman is going to be the new Attorney General. Then all of a sudden Eric Holder is the Attorney General again, and we have no real understanding of who is running what and what's going how. These are all tactics that they use, and you have to understand the big picture to understand it. Because the problem is black community has no leadership, and you really need somebody like a CEO to show you the big picture, the 5 to 7 year picture, or the 10 to 15 year picture. And black people, they're so short sighted. They only see a small part of the picture. They don't see the big picture, which is these guys running a shell game so that they can continue business as usual. And they have already predicted your response before you even did it. That's what the whole thing with chess, especially when you're playing against novice players. What they're going to do is they already know what you're going to do because they already know the board, they know the rules, and they know what you're going to do. They know what you can do. And what black people have done is they're playing this no justice, no peace, hands up, don't shoot, I can't breathe. These are nice slogans, but they're not part of a comprehensive plan to combat the white supremacy and the corporate cultures that keep the status quo going. And you need a long-term strategy to deal with this. I mean, and group economics is part of a longer-term strategy because what black people's big problem is they look for one quick solution, and you can't do this with one quick solution. You can't do this with one magic bullet. You need a comprehensive long-term plan to deal with the issues of white supremacy and racism, which lead to these cases. And we're not seeing that. What we're seeing is, more march. It makes you feel good. Marching makes you feel good. Protesting makes you feel good. Making these signs with markers and pens that you bought from Staples or some non-black business, yeah, that makes you feel good. But it doesn't have a direct impact on the situation. It does not change the culture. And again, that they do is a lot of surface stuff, like with De Blasio. Here in New York, what he is talking about he's giving police officers further training. No, you have to get rid of the managers who created the culture, and that means getting rid of a lot of ingrained managers who have been there for 15, 20, 30, 40 years. And if you don't get those people out, you can't create the culture that will build the trust and relationships between the police and the community and create those procedures that will help. Because when you have a culture, it's harder to change than anything else, and the only way to change it is to remove people and replace them with people who are interested in creating a new culture and a new set of values and a new value system. But that's a lot harder. That's very hard to do because again, a lot of people are codependent. A lot of black people and white people are codependent on the system of white supremacy and racism because that is the way they were born, that is the way they were raised, and that is the way they make money in this country. I really think that it would take a foreign state literally making a statement to wake America up about how dysfunctional it is and how this codependent relationship between blacks and whites, because we always talk about this wanting to have this dialogue on race, but really it's gone from race to a codependent way of living for blacks and whites in America. I really look at it as really a mental health situation because In a codependent situation, one person has more power in the relationship than the other. And if you look at America, and they have more power over the other person. Um, if you look at America, again, this is my theory on codependency. White people and black people are codependent on each other because I look at it this way. White people are addicted to white supremacy, and some black people are addicted to white supremacy, and both of them are they have this emotional reliance on each other due to this dysfunctional condition, which I call white supremacy and racism. I look at white supremacy as a mental health issue, really, because when you have this excessive need to be feeling of superiority and excessive need to feel powerful, there's something wrong with you. No human being, God did not make any human being to be better than any other human being, but that's what white supremacy teaches people from birth. This is the culture transmitted from the white mother to not only the white child, but it was also been transmitted to the black child through the black woman who was brought here, and both of them were. This is the culture that they were both taught, and this codependent issue, this mental health issue in America, I really think it's going to take somebody from a foreign state to come out and call America on it and say, look, you're always talking about democracy and freedom and civil rights, but what about Eric Garner? What about Michael Brown? And really show America for the hypocrite that it truly is, because it likes to go to other people's countries and talk about extol the virtues of democracy, but there is no democracy here because there is a mental health issue here in America with this codependency that I see between black people and white people when it comes to race. And both parties are looking to be the victim. And because both parties both see themselves as, they see the victim as a position of power. And when one does one wrong to the other, they say it's his fault that I did this. And that's part of codependency. Codependent person will sit there and say, they'll sit there and get drunk and screw up and then say, well, it's your fault that I got drunk and screwed up. And then the other person will then say, well, I asked you to do this. And it's back and forth, back and forth. It's like a cat and mouse game. When you're dealing with codependent people, neither one really wants to solve the problem. That's why we haven't had a dialogue on race, because codependent people don't want a solution. They just want to be the victim because they see the victim as a position of power, and the position and the being the victim is the only way they know how to get their needs met. They don't want to do for self. They don't want to be self-reliant. That's why people didn't like Bill Cosby. That's why both black people and even some white people didn't like Bill Cosby, because he spoke on the message of doing for self and getting yourself together, because he sees what happened with black people, how they have become codependent on white supremacy, and how instead of going up since the end of the civil rights movement, things have actually gotten worse. And we've gone from, functional black people trying to become functional to this sad state of like perpetual victims, generation after generation, and nobody has a sense of responsibility and nobody wants to do for self. And with white people, we have this inflated sense of superiority and thinking that you're better than everybody else. But the world has changed in such a way that we're seeing that, white people aren't as superior as they think they are, because I'm looking at the rise of, a lot of Middle Easterners, a lot of Indians, Latinos, the Chinese, and they're becoming more and more competitive, and America is becoming less and less competitive due to this codependency. I mean, I'm looking at, yeah, you have a lot of white people in positions of power, and there's a large concentration of wealth, but I don't see them long term being competitive in the world, because we have too many people who are they feel entitled to everything, and that's a big problem in America, especially with white folks, is that they feel extremely entitled. And I'm seeing it with black people too these days, that they feel very entitled. They feel that they deserve everything, that they don't have to work hard for anything. There is no work ethic or sense of doing for self. They expect somebody to just give them something, whereas people from other lands, know that they have to come here. They've only got their shirt on their back, and they have to work to get what they need. And again, this goes back to what Bill Cosby was saying. He wanted black people to start getting into this mindset of doing for self and building your own thing, because that's the only way you're going to survive. And black people have become this group of victims, thanks to the post civil rights and these integration policies, these liberal policies, and we've gone from, yeah, they're very, a lot of people went to college and everything, but they don't know how to do anything. They're just educated victims, like, they just, yeah, they've got jobs and everything, but they don't know how to do anything for self, and they don't know how to build for self. I mean, if these jobs weren't here, these guys would be starving. Um, and this is the state that America has fallen into, and we really have to start looking at the big picture here in America. I know I've gone off on a tangent from Eric Garner to this, talking about race and codependency, but codependency is a big part of why we can't have this dialogue on race, because everybody wants to continue to be the victim. Um, and white supremacists, and the like, being in the superior position and being over black people, and they both want to play this victim game where they say this one did me wrong, this black man is no good, and then you have black people saying that this white man is no good. When the whole victimization game is not helping either side, and I'm looking at the country, it's falling further and further into a ditch because we can't do anything about this race issue. We're not trying to do anything on a mental health level, because we really need to deal with this as a mental health issue. And a lot of people may think that, oh, that's a bad word to say that, we need to deal with race on a mental health issue. But yeah, I really believe that we really need to deal with race as a mental health issue. This racism, it's it's so permeated the minds of both black people and white people that it's preventing the country from growing. And that's why I believe it needs to be dealt with as a mental health issue, because when you come in to a situation and you see the big picture with what was done with Eric Garner and Michael Brown, the propaganda campaign to exonerate these officers for their wrongdoing, that has a long-term effect on the direct impact of the country, because eventually, sooner or later, you're going to stop seeing black people as human. After you stop seeing black people as human, you're going to stop seeing white people as human, and that's what leads to societies falling apart, because brutal cops who aren't stopped at one level rise up in the ranks and become captains, lieutenants, and they start teaching that culture to the next generation of officers. And that's why I said, and as I said earlier in the video, you have to kill the culture. You cannot just go after individuals. This was a point I made in one of my novels, The Temptation of John Haynes. I made this exact same point later in the novel, because he ran into a racial profile. He was a CEO of the corporation that he had just gotten hired for, and he had gotten racially profiled um, by his own security staff. And what he did was he said, I can't just fire the officers, because that's what the devil wanted him to do in the story. He said, oh, he's going to get emotional and fire the officers that profiled him. And he came back with a comprehensive plan and said, I'm not going after the officers. I have to go after the managers who created the culture. And that's what black people have to start doing. They have to start looking at it from that perspective, because a CEO has to look at it from a bigger picture and say, look, if I go after the officers, I can just fire these officers. This culture is still going to go here. And we have to look at the culture and the values that created these individuals, because, again, this goes all the way back to the culture that's transmitted by the mothers. And this is what has been transmitted since the inception of this country. And we really have to look at that big picture. And that's what I said in the novel, that he was looking at the big picture and saying, I can't go after the officers. I have to go after the managers, and I have to make sure that I get these managers out of here. And that's what he did. He fired the head of security, and he began his retraining with his new um, head of security. And usually, when you hire a new manager, the old people usually head out the door. in most business situations, and in most jobs I've had, this is what I saw. When you hire a new manager, all the old people just leave because they know that the culture is going to change. And when you change the culture, you can get rid of all of these individuals, and you can start creating new policies. But black people don't think that abstractly, and they don't think that deeply to understand that you just can't go after the officer. Yeah, you want to get rid of the officer. Yeah, he should be fired. That's an emotional response. And once you do that, then you have to go after the managers who created the culture. And I'm not seeing that from Mayor de Blasio. I'm not seeing that type of plan. He's just coming up with superficial, band aid type strategies, which is, oh, the officers are going to be retrained. No, you have to go a lot deeper, and a lot of these senior people who created this culture and still are in these high-ranking positions as lieutenants and captains and have brass, they're still there, and they're still permeating this culture about black people and this racial profiling and all these other aspects. They're still on the job. Um, so I remember after reading about Rodney King, that's one of the reasons why I got the point of the story in the novel. One of the reasons I wrote that in the novel is because they said a lot of the guys who were in that case cleared. Several of those guys kept their jobs. They may have put two of the cops in jail, but the other ones went back to the job, and they went up and became high ranking officers, and the culture is still there in the LAPD, and the culture is still here in NYPD. It's a culture, and you have to fight the culture, and that's one of the big problems that black people don't understand. And then we ourselves, as black people, have allowed our culture to deteriorate um, immensely with this thug culture. We allowed that. That was made up by corporate boardroom executives. That was not made by black people, and a lot of black people don't understand it. Thug culture, gangster culture. That's not black culture. That was made up by corporate executives and presented as black culture. And a lot of people ate it up. A lot of black people ate it up because they saw the pictures of these guys like Ice Cube and Eazy-E and the NWA and Dr. Dre. They saw all these people, Snoop Dogg, and they took that on and saw it as regular social behavior from black people. No, it was marketing and advertising, and the marketing and advertising became the social norm. Um, and again, this is why I talk about long-term strategies and having a long-term strategy, because you have to see big pictures, and you have to understand that this is how white supremacy works. They don't work on a short-term thing. They just don't go, oh, we're just gonna we're just gonna just let it slide. They know how you're going to react before you even react. They have watched your strategies. They watched previous incidents. Like I'll even go back far. When I was a kid, we had this incident with a guy called Yusuf Hawkins. He was shot by several white people because he went into Bensonhurst, Brooklyn at the time. It was mostly white, and he went to say they said he was going to go look at a car, and he got shot and killed. And at the time, they with Yusuf Hawkins is a lot of people marched and protested, and at the time, yeah, they did get a murder conviction at that time. But what they did was they've learned from those events like Yusuf Hawkins, Amadou Diallo, Patrick Dorismond. They've learned from those, and they've learned so well that instead of getting convictions for people now, this is why you get no indictment, because they've learned from those strategies from those cases to create the strategies to counter you right now. And this is what white supremacy does. They come up with other strategies. They come up with these strategies long term because they know how you're going to react. They know you're going to go out and march and protest. They know you're going to get out in the streets, but you have to have a counter plan. Black people don't have that counter plan. We don't have a long term strategy for dealing with situations like this. And that's why you need group economics. That's why you need to own businesses, and then you need to own property and build a black community. Because our black community nowadays, as I said before, was a hood. It's not a full black community with resources to protect people like Eric Garner. Because the way we could have protected him was one, making sure he had a job so he could take care of his family, so he wouldn't be out on the street and get be out having to be out here hustling loose cigarettes, um, and being a target. And two, we'd have the economic base to hire our own police officers and, you know, control who's in the precinct, who's in the firehouse, because all that comes with business ownership. When you own things in the community, you have a say over what's in the community and what people are in the community. And black people, we really don't have that economic base. We're starting to build it, but then we let it go to follow the road to integration. And the road to integration has really led to the disintegration of the black community. I know this video is going long, but I wanted to make a lot of points about certain things because for me, the whole Eric Garner situation is a lot deeper than a chokehold. It needs to be dealt with in a different fashion. I mean, the approaches used by Reverend Sharpton and these black civic organizations is archaic, and it's going to be totally ineffective in dealing with dealing with things. I mean, yeah, you might get Daniel Pantaleo on a federal civil rights charge, but when I look at the Michael Brown situation, it's pretty much done. I don't see any civil rights charges there, but again, the culture is the problem. And then we get these talks about issues of race, and we're going to have these guys talking about, we need to talk about race, you need to show your kids. No, we need to deal with race as a mental health issue, because I look at race, when I look at mental health issues prevent people from growing to be the person they can possibly be. And the big problem with Americans is we don't want to look at race as a mental health issue and say that there's a mental illness in believing that, you know, that black people aren't human and I have a right to do whatever I want to people because I feel a sense of superiority because I was born with white skin. This mindset really needs to be seen as what it is, a mental illness. Just like on the black side where you have all this black self-hatred. Again, that's a mental illness, and that's why I say race needs to be dealt with as a mental illness, and it needs to be dealt with as a mental health issue. Because it's destroying America. I mean, I look at it, here we are 50 years after the sick murder of Emmett Till, and we're still dealing with the same issues. And politics, legal issues, economic issues are not really dealing with this issue. We really have to, and that's why I say it has to be dealt with as a mental health issue, because there is something wrong with the culture being transmitted from both black mothers and white mothers these days that is leading to this being passed on generation after generation. And again, like I said before, and other things talking about culture, this culture has to be changed. And the only way we're going to change this culture is by acknowledging the problem and then working towards building towards different things. And one of the things we have to do in the black community is understand that the same approaches aren't going to work, and it's time to apply a different approach to the way we fight for civil rights. It's time for us to walk away from Dr. King's dream and start going in a new direction. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.